On August 1st, Knight Capital Group, a market-making American global financial services firm that handled $21 billion in transactions daily, turned the switch on for a new product. This product would fill trade orders with a complex new system that would split the original stock order into smaller orders. The company manually deployed the product to 7 out of 8 of their servers, not realizing that they had skipped the last server, a server that had 8-year-old, dead, unused code on it that shared a switch with the new product. So when the switch went live, the dead code was reborn. This caused some of the smaller orders to not be filled, essentially making the company assume the position and be forced to provide the asset or liquidity. Within 45 minutes, Knight Capital Group took on a loss worthy of the Wall Street Bets Hall of Fame, a net negative position of $460 million. They had 48 hours to make up the difference or declare bankruptcy. Now, why the hell am I telling you this? Because this is what can happen when developers continue to be lazy and not clean up their own shitty code. But more importantly, it's when developers cannot properly analyze the risks of their own decisions. These decisions can be as small as simply not deciding to clean up your own code to as big as designing and architecting an entire system. The only difference between any single one of these decisions is just the impact and the amount of risks that you take on. So today, I'll be discussing what risk management means in software engineering, how to maintain the tail risk of your code and your coding decisions, and how most of you walk around assuming a large amount of tail risk without even realizing it. So first, what the hell is tail risk? Tail risk is, by definition, a form of portfolio risk that arises when the possibility that an investment will move more than 3 standard deviations from the mean. However, we're not in finance, we're in software development. So, in this case, it is a small yet non-zero possibility that the actions of your development team will cause a major incident. Picture it like this. Every project that you do, whether that is skipping, cleaning your code base, or writing a new feature on Facebook, comes with risks and rewards. Ultimately, we want impactful endeavors, whether that is writing products that people will use or generating the company money in some particular way. The investment in this endeavor is your time and resources that could go to other projects. And in deciding how much to allocate, you're also considering questions like, what is the probability of this code breaking our entire product? What happens if this product fails? How many people would we hurt or benefit in this scenario? So then, what does the distribution of risk and reward look like for any given project? This seems like a pretty simple question to ask, right? After all you're really asking is how risky is the product that we're writing? Well, as long as we test it, we'll be fine, right?
But they'll be relatively small. We have an entire system to catch us, and so it won't be a big deal.
Oh, I insist that it's actually a very big deal, much bigger than you actually realize. If you believe that risk in software engineering is a normal standard distribution, then congrats. You might as well work for Bill Huang and Archegos Capital in their risk management department. Oh wait, that department doesn't actually exist. The reality is that tail risk looks more like this, with a very, very big and long skinny tail at the end. Developers always overestimate the benefits and underestimate the downsides of whatever the heck they are doing, and what happens during those tail risk scenarios. This is really the part of the curve no one focuses on, or even really manages, not even in coding. And it's not really that surprising. After all, when you're dealing with large complex systems, you are really only aware of your own little piece of the world. You are not really aware of how interlocking failures can cascade down and break an entire system. You assume that the system is well built such that it will catch every single one of your mistakes. But I'm here to tell you that you should really think about those worst case scenarios because the system can fail from time to time. So let me actually give you a simple example scenario. Suppose you are on a DevOps team and you need to service 300 people, the 300 developers in your company. You deploy a fix that is P99 good. This means that even though you have serviced 297 people flawlessly, you will have 3 people pinging you about issues that they are having, and you will need to go to them individually, debug their machines, and figure out what the fuck the issue is. This can easily be a few hours or a few days of lost productivity on your part and the person you're helping, depending on the issue. And developers can cost $300 or more, depending on how long you take to get things up and running again. So, in other words, this entire endeavor could lose you upwards of $1,000 or more per hour. Knowing all that, how much more seriously would you take any single endeavor, especially if the company held you personally responsible for any lost productivity? Well, you'd ensure that P99 scenario would actually be P999, or 99.9% flawless. After all, no one wants to lose a couple $100,000. I mean, I certainly don't. If I wanted to, I'd just fucking YOLO all my money on out-of-the-money call options on Tesla. And this is kind of the state of the world as software engineering exists today. Developers are constantly relying on a system of checks and tests in order to catch their mistakes and believe that the system is absolutely foolproof. But that's the beauty and curse of such a hardened system at these big tech companies. They're designed to catch every single possible error, but they don't. And developers assume their efficacy. So in other words, when that one error, that one black swan sneaks through the cracks, nobody knows or understands what the hell just happened. And this abuse of safety mechanisms is actually so rampant. Developers lean too much on them and misuse them in order to prevent any real critical thinking. That there is some switch, some plugin out there that is designed to bail them out of trouble in case the fix doesn't go as planned, which in some case is true, but it's not an excuse to overload that one feature or switch with just random brain-dead code. At several points in time, developers at Knight Capital understood the importance of cleaning their code up, but they chose not to do it. It wasn't until the magical sequence of events triggered a major catastrophic failure that almost bankrupted the entire company did people actually begin to realize how big a risk they actually took on. So, knowing all this, what can you do as a software engineer? From this point on, this is just my opinion, but the principles and reasonings should be something that you all should apply to your own code and engineering. So whenever taking on a project, we should assume some level of Murphy's Law, that the risks will materialize at some point. It's not a matter of if these problems will occur, but when. Humans are fallible, and this approach isn't necessarily guaranteed to be bulletproof either, because every single step must be performed by a human, but it will prevent us from accidentally adopting too much of the tail risk. So, the first question we should ask ourselves in any scenario is, what is the absolute worst case scenario that this code can evolve into if left unchecked? And can I accept this risk? If some code needs to be retired and I don't do anything, the tail risk scenario is that this code gets brought back to life when it's in production. Or if we decide to go ahead and remove the code, I might break another feature that is dependent on it that I don't know about that is using this code. Understanding the worst case scenario of every single decision that you make will allow you to evaluate the risks and rewards. If you are not able to accept the consequences of the worst case scenario, then you need to find ways to reduce this, whether it's through intermediate steps such as removing non-used code, slowly parsing the problem down, or having a revert switch that allows you to undo any potential mistakes or errors. In the case of Knight Capital, there were several risk points to consider. The first is the shared flag between the deprecated and the new product. Was it acceptable to inadvertently turn on another product, especially since the flag was used before? Another is the manual deployment. Was it acceptable to accidentally forget to deploy the new code onto the new servers? But the biggest and most underestimated risk of the entire situation with Knight Capital was the unused code. The flag that was used could have been used for any other product. So the risk here is, was it acceptable to have that code be brought back to life inadvertently? Which in hindsight is actually kind of stupid. Leveraging the functionality of a single flag onto multiple unrelated products is the same as leveraging a huge percentage of your bank accounts on a single trade and hoping it doesn't fuck you over. Eventually it will. After all, you're leveraging that flag for multiple different scenarios. These aren't the only factors and questions that you should be considered. We should consider if any developer in the codebase lost time reading this dead code when it wasn't even actually important. Some developer might be deep diving, trying to debug things, and then stumbles upon the dead code, and then wanders around a labyrinth of it that nobody understands or knows about, and eventually finds out that this code is absolutely useless. So, try to uncover as many of these angles as you can as a developer whenever undertaking any kind of decision. Consider every and all customers of your code and how easily it can be abused. The second is to have a relatively bulletproof insurance policy. And no, we can't simply just go to State Farm and ask them to write us one. We need to craft a policy that allows us to eject and recover from our worst case scenario. And in most cases, for big tech companies, the company's insurance policy when it comes to code is usually a series of systems in place that are designed to handle any issue that might occur. Sometimes these are rollback systems. Other times these are a series of tests that continually run on the CI/CD pipeline. And sometimes is a person who needs to wake up at 3 a.m. whenever he gets a phone call about something that went down. Now, who really makes great decisions at 3 a.m.? If the insurance policy is to simply push a kill switch and be done, then it's a great insurance policy because it's absolutely simple. It is very difficult to fuck that up. But if the insurance policy is to debug it when a problem happens, then that is a terrible one. After all, can you really afford to have a developer try to debug some code that is mission critical at 3 a.m. with only 2 hours of sleep? And this is essentially the idea behind Uber's plugin architecture. The architecture is constructed such that any node in the tree can be pruned with a simple switch. Any parent feature can kill any child feature at any time remotely. In the case of Knight Capital, they had the opposite. They had a terrible insurance policy. The on-call system didn't label any of the automated error messages as system errors. There was no kill switch, and there was no documented procedure for how to react. People were trying to diagnose an issue where 8 million shares were being traded every single minute on a live environment. Fucking brilliant.
We'll do it live! Fuck it!
Finally, the last question is if we can afford the insurance policy. After all, we might have a great way of backing out of things, but can we afford the time and resources to maintain and upkeep it? In any case, the question remains, can we afford it? Can we afford to maintain this rollback infrastructure? Can we afford to keep and maintain an on-call rotation? And in doing so, what are we not allocating time and resources to? If the policy is systematic, then it scales well, and this becomes much less of an issue of scaling as we can just add one more element or product to keep an eye on. In maintaining the system and keeping the schedule up, what we give up isn't just sleep, but the ability to push out products out faster. Resources dedicated to double-checking code, keeping an eye out for potential incidents, and having some guy be at the ready at 3 a.m. are resources that are not dedicated to other endeavors. So, make sure you have weighed the cost and benefits of the product correctly before you go ahead and insure it. In closing, the tale of Knight Capital is a cautionary one, but similar incidents happen every single day across the world due to the developers' inability to truly understand risk management in software. Hedging against tail risk against a catastrophic event is not unlike hedging in investing. It only takes one black swan event, a random fluke, whether that is from an external environment or a series of small fuck-ups that lead to one big fuck-up in a chain of internal decisions to blow your company up and your code base to shit. If you follow these steps, or at least have some understanding of hedging risk in software development and maintain that attitude, you will find yourself considering questions and possibilities that most people never actually think about. In these nuanced and seemingly crazy and unrelated questions is where the company can lose the greatest amount of money. And for you, it presents a great opportunity to not just become a valuable to the company, but to become a valuable engineer. So that'll do for me. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Also, feel free to follow me on my socials where you can vote for what topic I cover next. And if you want to try and secure the next job offer, you can book me for interview coaching at eChanTech.com. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.